Hello friends, welcome. Friends, yesterday or day before yesterday, the TRAI came out with this recommendation dated 17th February 2025 on terms and condition of network authorization to be granted under the Telecommunication Act 2023. Now friends, one of my YouTube watcher wanted me to do a video on this. So I thought over it and I was quite confused what to do, right? So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to give you something more which is not explicit while you read through this recommendation, because you will never understand what are the implication of this recommendation. And I'm going to tell you the implication. Rather than going into each and every word of the recommendation, I'm going to tell you the implication on the overall telecom industry. Now friends, in order for you to understand the implication, I have to give you certain background. So I'll try to keep the background as short as possible. Otherwise, the implication story is not going to get captured in the time window that I have planned for this video. Okay, so be with me. And since I do not do any kind of editing of my video, I do it in one single shot. So it's a challenge for me to basically tell the story in such a short window of time. Right? So let's begin. The first thing first. There were two recommendations. This is the second recommendation in the series of recommendation of TRAI under the Telecom Act, which came out in 2023, right? Which replaced the earlier act. So the first recommendation was this recommendation, 18 September 2024. And this is the recommendation which came out in 17 February 2025. And the title of both the recommendations are same. Network Authorization granted under Telecommunication Act 2023. Here also you will see Network Authorization framework of service author. Actually, it is network authorization. This is service authorization to be granted. So there is two difference. One is service authorization and this is network authorization. Now, why there is two distinction? Service authorization and network authorization. That's what I'm going to tell you first. So if you go to the Indian Telecommunication Act of 2023, you will find this section. Section 3.1. Any person intending to provide telecommunication services, A, establish, operate, maintain telecommunication network. So the A part was captured in this recommendation, the earlier one, this one. Service authorization to be granted under Telecommunication Act 18 September 2024, which means that anybody wanting to offer services to the end consumer will be covered by this recommendation. Okay, so that's one. Second recommendation is this: establish, operate, maintain, expand telecommunication network. So this part is covered by this recommendation, which means that anybody who is only operating, maintaining a telecommunication network and not offering services to the end consumer will be covered by this recommendation. That's a distinction. Now friends, why this recommendation I would consider as more important than the earlier recommendation? Now you will find it very, very strange what I am telling you, because the earlier recommendation is much more expansive. It is 837 pages long, right? So people might be saying that, oh, by the way, the earlier recommendation is more important than this recommendation, which is much shorter of 379 pages, right? So you will find it very surprising now. So let me tell you the story why this recommendation is more important than the earlier recommendation. The reason is that this recommendation, if it is implemented by DOT, is going to fundamentally change the way the telecom sector works. Now, for that, you have to go back to history. I'm going to tell you the history first. In 1995, when the licensing regime was first introduced, it was a fixed licensing regime. The fixed licensing regime got converted in year 1999 to a revenue share licensing regime because of the telecom industry was required to be bailed out because they misjudged their license fee and they overcommitted to the government. Okay. Then the government says that, okay, I understand that you are in stress, so let me just bail you out and I convert that into a revenue share licensing regime. Now in the revenue share licensing regime, though it appeared that it bailed the operator out, but it constrained the operator to behave in such a manner. Why? Because revenue share, the whole revenue share concept was applied on the total revenue of the companies with very little provision of pass-through. Means that let's say if you are generating revenue for selling services to even to your partner, let's say if there is an operator 1 and there is an operator 2 who are collaborating with each other and want to share equipment with each other in order to deliver services to optimize cost, then he was not allowed to do so, because as soon as you start collaborating with each other, because there will be a business arrangement, there will be some revenue exchange between both the operators, then what will happen is that one operator's cost will become revenue of the other operator, when vice versa, and they will pay license fee on the total revenue. Therefore, the outflow of the operator, just because they want to collaborate and share equipment, is going to expand, and therefore there was no motivation for them to do any kind of sharing. Now, the government of India basically did so because they wanted to maximize revenue and prevent revenue leakage. But what happened was, as they progressed forward in time, I don't know what happened, some eureka thing happened, and a new category of license emanated, which is called IP1. Now, IP1 was quite strange. It never happened in a telecom sector where such a fundamental part of the telecom, you can say infrastructure, was kept out of the revenue share licensing regime. It was basically to be registered only. Now, when a tower company, which is fundamental to the telecom sector, right, telecom infrastructure, was kept away from the licensing regime, then what happened was, then this whole double counting and the whole, outflow of the license or the license fee of the telecom operators, just because they want to share infrastructure, no longer was applicable to the tower companies, because tower companies did not pay any license fee. So then what happened was, people started collaborating and the tower companies started flourishing. Okay, now you are trying to, those who are knowledgeable, who can see between the lines, now probably will be able to understand what I'm talking about. So everybody started saying, oh, by the way, infrastructure sharing is a great story. India has done infrastructure sharing, but people have forgotten the fact that this whole license fee, a revenue share, of a percentage of revenue, license fee and a percentage of revenue, when the tower company was prevented from any license fee, which is a percentage of the revenue, then only this whole industry flourished and the infrastructure sharing happened. People really didn't see to that, because those operators know that they are doing tower sharing only because the suboptimal structure of the revenue share or license fee as a percentage of revenue share is no longer applicable to the tower, and that's why this business becomes so much viable. Now, what happened was, these IP1 companies wanted to share something more, some active elements also. And there were multiple recommendations which TRAI gave and said that, look, the same structure which is the tower companies currently have, same should be applicable to those companies who wants to install networks and share their network among multiple operators. Means there has to be an entity who is a network service provider, and they can give away their capacity to the operator, so that instead of just sharing tower, they can start sharing equipment. TRAI came out with multiple such recommendations, but DOT did not accept any of the TRAI recommendation because of the fact that there was legal opinion was taken. But I believe that DOT felt that this is going to lead to revenue leakage, because if they allowed the infrastructure companies to start giving away their infrastructure services to the telecom operators, then whatever revenues that were generated out of the telecom service providers having separate equipment and then giving a license fee on that particular percentage would get somehow constrained, or there could be some leakages which might take place if they allowed that structure, and they wanted to limit it to only the IP1 companies. Now, this recommendation, now you will understand what is going on. This recommendation is giving a way to have a similar structure which exists in the IP1 companies to be implemented to the network service providers also, who are operating, owning equipment, active equipment, and giving away their services or sharing their capacity to the telecom operator. This was never implemented earlier because the telecom operators were not intending to share their active infrastructure, because it was suboptimal, because they have to pay double the license fee if they get into that arrangement. Now, this is where this whole recommendation becomes important, and I don't know whether the DOT is going to accept this recommendation or not, but this is what the genesis of this whole issue is. And that's why I said that this recommendation is pretty important compared to the earlier recommendation, which was only for service authorization. This is for network authorization, right? And there are some other ancillary things also like CDN and in-building in a solution, etc., which the TRAI has said in this recommendation that you don't have to take any authorization. Okay, so that is the genesis of this recommendation, and it all depends because after having 5 years of recommendation, TRAI continuously keep giving. You will see that I have underlined various sections, right, where TRAI continuously kept giving recommendation to the DOT. I'll just pull out one term here. Let me just go down below because this is a pretty long recommendation. Just a minute, I'll show you what TRAI had suggested initially. This is called. Just a minute. Just hold on for a minute. Yeah. So there are so many. I have read through this recommendation, and I have understood what is going on. Yeah. So this. Okay. Yeah. So if you look at this, the IP1 providers are not permitted. IP1 providers are not permitted to own, share activity infrastructure. IP1 providers can only install active elements, limited antenna feed, on behalf of the telecom operators. You see, on behalf of the telecom licensees, these elements should be owned by the telecom company, right? So this is IP1, right? And then what the TRAI did was TRAI came out with a new recommendation. And they called it. Meanwhile, in year 2000, TRAI recommendation infrastructure policies, you leave that aside. I'll just go down below. You see, the further recommendation has been examined by DOT Commission, and then the active infrastructure. DOT is saying active infrastructure can only be provided by telecom licensees. The IP1 registration holder cannot be allowed to provide active infrastructure under IP1 registration unless they are shifting their licensing regime, right? That is, they pay a revenue share. TRAI recommendation cannot be accepted, right? And then they came out with a new category of license called Telecom Infrastructure License. And then they said that please provide your recommendation. So DOT said that we don't accept your earlier recommendation that the IP1 should be allowed to do active infrastructure also. But we are going to come out with a new category of license called TIL, and that you give recommendation that what should be the terms and condition of that license. And under that banner, TRAI came out with a new recommendation called Digital Connectivity Infrastructure Provider, DCIP authorization under that, and he gave a recommendation, and it said that this is also going to be a light touch license and there will be no revenue share, right? And it should not include spectrum, it should not, DCIP authorization should not include the provision of end-to-end bandwidth using transmission system, blah blah, and there should not be any license fee applicable. Look at this, there should not be any license fee applicable, right? But DOT did not listen to that. DOT kept on basically put that in abeyance, and then it says authorization under UL dated under consideration and yet to be implemented. See, this is yet to be implemented by DOT. Now, under this background, this new recommendation is again coming, where the IP1 is kept intact as it was, and this new authorization, which I told you is the digital DCIP, is now being given in the new, we can say the old wine in a new bottle. That's all. There is nothing. So if this gets implemented, so this is the essence of this recommendation. That's all, right? You can go and read through because it makes no sense. All the provisions of the earlier licensing regime has been incorporated here, and it has become such a big document that people will get crazy when they read through it, because there is no point in going through it because most of the provisions are same. They have been continuously get announced on the relief packages, etc. All have been made part of the recommendation. But the essence is that the new category of network service authorization, network authorization, is being proposed by TRAI, where there will be no revenue share. And what is going to be that implication on the network operators' ability to offer services, whether they will accept this whether they will find this as a useful mechanism of leveraging what they have done in case of IP1, which became one of the biggest, you can say, the success story of Indian telecom, where the tower sharing became the norm of the day, right? Similarly, network sharing will become norm of the day or not. It all depends upon DOT. Because DOT, let me be very blunt about this. The licensing regime of percentage revenue share actually has been counterproductive for both the DOT and the operator. It is probably the worst decision which the government of India could have taken. Though it appeared to be quite good, it has made the telecom industry grow, bailed them out of the situation. But if you do a calculation of the amount of money that the telecom operators have spent, given on license fee, spectrum fee, it will, and you do the DCF calculation, it will be many times more than the fixed licensing regime. That is one. Second is that whatever the government wanted to collect from the telecom operators in terms of license fee, right, and the AGR judgment which came out, they have not been able to collect because many of the operators got bankrupt, and Vodafone Idea, which has a debt of 2.2 lakh crores, out of which substantial debt is on the AGR judgment, where the dispute was the definition of revenue. Now DOT is thinking of giving them a waiver, which is going on in the press and everybody knows about that. So it has been a counterproductive, right, decision, both in the interest of the operators as well as in the interest of DOT. It has served no purpose, and it has prevented the operators to optimize their investment because they were not allowed to share. They could not have shared their active elements because of this fear of double counting of license fee, right? And that is continuously recommended by TRAI because the TRAI probably saw this, and then they said that no, there has to be a network authorization which will be similar in lines of IP1. But DOT never accepted this, thinking that it is going to lead to leakage of revenue. But it's almost like, you're holding a bucket and trying to, you can say somehow, plug a small hole, but that bucket already has a large hole in some other part of their system, which is already draining water. So all the AGR revenues have been drained out in the process of trying to plug a small leak. That's what DOT has done. It is very, very funny. People can see through right now the amount of problems that DOT has created. So this is the genesis of this recommendation. And you can go into the details like IBS, like CDN, etc., where the DOT is, TRA is saying that you don't have to even take an authorization. Those are side things. Those are not that kind of implication. Now it has to be seen whether DOT will accept the TRA's recommendation on active infrastructure network element to be authorized under the license fee regime under light touch with no revenue share. That's the main point of discussion here. Rest of the whole effort of TRAI of coming out with this recommendation, laying down the authorization documents may not be that interesting. The most important part of this recommendation, that's why I said this is the most important recommendation, and the whole success of this recommendation will depend upon whether the DOT is able to accept this network service authorization without imposing any revenue share. That's all is what we are going to watch, and maybe there are some more recommendations like the IBS or in-building solution and all those things which are also significant. I'm not saying that those are not significant, but it's like TRA trying to bail the operators out from the clutches of the revenue share regime, which has prevented the industry to grow and optimize cost. That's all is going on, friends, and that is the essence and that is the background of this recommendation. I hope that probably you've understood what this means for the telecom industry and what the real story is. I have tried to cut the story as short as possible. It's a long story. I've written many articles about this in past, that how revenue share regime has created more bottleneck for the telecom industry than solving problems. So those you can read in my website. Rest I think I've already explained. You can go into this recommendation if you have the time, right? It is 379 pages. So depending on how much time you had, you read. I have gone through most of it. As you see, I've underlined it, and if you need any specific question to be answered, let me know. in the comment section, and I will try my level best to answer those questions. Thank you for your time, and I'll come back with a new video next.